All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, people watching online. Welcome to the City of Summerside Committee of the Whole for August 6, 2024. On this evening's agenda, we have Planning Board to start, followed by Committee of the Whole. And then at 6 p.m., there's a special council meeting. If we're not quite through the whole agenda, we will end and start that special council meeting, but we fully expect to be done. So first off is the Planning Board. So we'll call the Planning Board meeting to order. And first we would need an approval of agenda. Approved by Councillor Doiron, seconded by Councillor Morrison. All in favor? So just for the record, Planning Board members are myself, Councillor Morrison, Councillor Doiron, and Mayor Kuchar, but he is currently away. So there's the three of us on the Planning Board. Next, we'll move to the approval of the agenda. If we get somebody to move the agenda. Councillor Doiron, seconded by Councillor Morrison. All in favor? Aye. And then, as we do with every meeting, we do a land acknowledgement. So we acknowledge that the land upon which we gather is unceded Mi'kmaq territory. Epiquet is covered by the historic treaties of peace and friendship. We pay our respects to the indigenous Mi'kmaq people who have occupied this island for over 12,000 years, past, present, and future. Land acknowledgement is a small but meaningful way of showing respect and honoring indigenous peoples of the land where we live. It is also a way of resisting the erasure of indigenous histories and the important step on the pathway towards reconciliation. Next, conflict of interest, if there's any conflict of interest. Not seeing any. And then we will pass it over to the Chair of Planning Board, Councillor Doiron.
All right, thank you, your Deputy Worship, I guess. Two items on the agenda for this evening, restricted use application and a proposed street name. Beginning with the restricted use application for 480 Central Street. The purpose of the application is to allow a retail store as a restricted use in the high-density residential R4 zone. A restricted use requires council approval. Background: an application was received from Core Ventures Inc. to allow a restricted use retail store in one unit of an 8-unit apartment building at 480 Central Street, PID number 1173798. The retail store will consist of a retail space, an office for nutrition consultations, and 2 tanning rooms. This application will require City Council approval to allow a restricted use in the high-density residential R4 zone. And the uses of the high-density residential R4 zone are noted below. High-density residential R4 zone, the current zoning purpose of this zone is to provide for high-density housing in the form of apartments, as well as housing in the form of single-family, semi-detached, duplex dwellings, row house, townhouse, and other compatible uses. And the permitted uses subject to bylaw requirements are listed there, as well as discretionary uses subject to council approval, and conditional uses subject to a development officer approval. Report under section 5.7 of the zoning bylaw. When planning board reviews a restricted use, it has to consider the following general criteria as applicable. A, conformity with all requirements of this bylaw, the zoning bylaw. Staff comment: a restricted use conforms with the bylaw, section 8.5, subject to council approval. The current zoning, high-density residential R4, does not change. And that section 8.5, the restricted use designation, is there. Is there any reason to read that in, or just due to the fact that it's part of the package? I guess it's available to anyone that would like to see that, but that is the restricted use designation, section 8.5. B, conformity with the official plan. Staff comment: the proposed restricted use would conform to the official plan, section 5.12. as the land use will remain as residential. The restricted use designation is to accommodate unique uses where an official plan amendment would result in undesirable land uses. Should the restricted uses cease to operate for 12 months, the restricted use lapses and the zoning remains as high-density residential R4 and can be utilized as such. The restricted use applies to the site, not the applicant. And that listed below is section 5.12, the restricted uses. Council's objective is to allow restricted uses in any zone. And the following are council's statements of policy. 1, to allow restricted uses in any zone. The underlying or current zoning of the property does not change and reverts back to the original zoning automatically when the restricted use ceases. And policy 2 is all restricted uses shall require a council discretionary use public process as specified in the zoning bylaw. Criteria C, suitability of the site for the proposed development. Staff comment, this site is currently developed and is connected to city servicing and street access. D, compatibility of the proposed development with surrounding land uses, including both existing and projected uses. Staff comment, the property is zoned high-density residential R4. The restricted use, retail store, is compatible with surrounding commercial residential neighborhood land uses. As per section 8.5, part E, council may attach terms and conditions to the restricted use approval. Council may revoke a restricted use approval for a violation to any term or condition attached to an approval, subject to a recommendation from the planning board. Criteria E, any comments from residents or other interested persons? A public meeting was held on July 15th, 2024. The public meeting notice was advertised in the June 29th edition of The Guardian. 7 letters were mailed to 9 property owners. Staff comment, at the public meeting, Corey Arsenault, representing Core Ventures, Inc., provided an overview of the proposed intent for the restricted use. No one from the public spoke at the public meeting and no written comments were received regarding this application. F, adequacy of existing water, sewer, road, stormwater, and electrical services, city parking, and parklands for accommodating the development and any projected infrastructure requirements. Staff comment, the existing street and storm drainage is adequate for the restricted use. City has adequate water supply and sewer treatment capacity for the proposed restricted use. G, impacts from the development on pedestrian or vehicular access and safety and on public safety generally. Staff comment, there is existing sidewalk on the east side of Central Street to accommodate the pedestrian traffic. H, compatibility of the development with environmental, scenic, and heritage resources. Staff comment, not applicable. I, impacts on city finances and budgets. Staff comment, this application does not impact city finances or budgets. J, other matters as specified in this bylaw, not applicable. And K, other matters as considered relevant, not applicable. Staff review. Staff do not support the application from Core Ventures, Inc. to allow a restricted use retail store, a retail space, an office for nutrition, consultations, and 2 tanning rooms in 1 unit of an 8-unit apartment building. The purpose of a restricted use designation is to restrict land use to a single use only. It is not intended to allow specific uses within a building. As per section 5.10, part B3 of the zoning bylaw, the planning board shall make a recommendation to council on this application before it is approved or denied. The planning board recommendation, whether carried or defeated, will be brought forward to council for a final decision. The planning board recommendation, the application from Core Ventures, Inc. to allow a restricted use retail store, which entails a retail space, an office space for nutrition, consultations, and 2 tanning rooms in 1 unit of an 8-unit apartment building at 480 Central Street, PID number 1173798, be recommended to be approved by council. Are there any questions or statements, comments? I was wondering if maybe it was stated there, but Linda, could you maybe just ever so simply outline why the staff do not support the application?
The intent of the restricted use is basically a use per property, not getting into uses within or multiple uses on the same property. So if we were to compare this to a 24-unit apartment building on Central Street or Tower Street or any other street in the city, we wouldn't want to be allowing uses within apartment buildings under this designation. That was not the intent.
Okay, can we flush out, because the, when I think of, and maybe this is just on a smaller scale, but when you think of mixed commercial residential use and the sort of future path of how that tends to be going within municipalities, I mean, this is obviously a very small one within a 8-unit, but we would see that happen throughout municipalities, correct? Like a mix of commercial bottom floor, let's say, to upper floors of residential. And I'm just trying to jive how sometimes not that we push for that, but that seems to be a push around globally, trying to get that mix of residential, commercial together. I don't know if I'm being
Yeah,
clear.
yes, there is a push for that, but basically, so for example, in our downtown before, we didn't allow residential in with the commercial. So that, it makes sense to allow that, but not in strict residential zones. I don't think we want to reverse that and start allowing commercial into the residential zone properties. So we now allow residential into commercial,
Mhm.
but not vice versa.
I do have a question in case it was to be approved. So where it says, where they're proposing a specific business, let's just, in hypotheticals, if this was to be approved and gets approval for a restricted use for a retail store, they're proposing a retail store X, so in this situation, it's a tanning bed with whatever sales, so on. If that store was to change to a different retail type store, would they have to come back to council, or would that still be approved because it's still a retail I'm thinking just outside the box, I'm thinking of what would happen. Because if the store changed its use, or the type of store, would it change? Would they have to come back for approval again from council?
Yeah, it depends how specific council want to be with that use, but we've specified exactly what he was looking for. But again, we, as staff, we don't recommend it
Yeah,
in the high residential zone, or in any other residential zone for that matter. So again, if council were to consider this or approve this, then we'd have precedent set, and this could happen out on Nevada Court in those apartments, or in any other apartment building within the city.
okay. Go ahead, Rick.
So, I think I understand it. So my question would be, and I can understand why he's doing it, because he owns the building and wants to keep one unit for himself to have a business in. If he was to sell the building, and this would be much like the deputy mayor's question, so does that designation go with it? And I'm assuming it would, but maybe we can put stipulations on it. Let's say he closes that business or sells the building, could we say then that is no longer zoned for that? It would have to go back to an apartment with the rest of it?
If you grant a restricted use, and if it continues to exist, so it's site-specific, again, we're being site-specific right down to a unit. We're
Right.
not talking about a property, we're talking about
A
one unit in a
yep.
building. And so it's site-specific, so it would, as long as that use continued, it would move right in. If property changed ownership, it would move. It's not granted to the applicant, it's granted to the property itself.
So then we couldn't say, yes, we'll grant it because it's you and you own the rest of the building, but if you sell the building or if you close your business, then that no longer applies.
That's correct. You can't do that yet.
Okay.
So the only way it would discontinue is if he discontinued that use for 12 months or more, then that would go away.
It would go back to.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, you had mentioned previously that this would sort of, if approved, set a precedent, and somebody with a 24-unit apartment could do the same thing. If this was a 24-unit apartment, and somebody on the second floor, whatever, wanted to do this, would that meet the same, because as I go through the criteria, most of them, if not all of them, it conforms to this, it conforms to that, so if you go by the criteria, it's okay, but then when it gets down to the staff recommendation, it's a no. So would those, this conforms, would it conform if it was in one of those 24-unit apartment buildings? Like, would it conform to our criteria the same way that it does in this case?
It doesn't actually, yeah, I guess the restricted use piece is, it's intended, the intention of that. So we're saying restricted uses conform, but in this specific case, when he's doing one unit in a building, we're recommending that not to happen. It's not good planning. And so like I said, I mentioned other apartment buildings. There's one up on Tower Street. This could happen. Top of Central Street with the new ones there, one over on Simmons Avenue. The intention of a restricted use is to allow a land use on a property. He already has it designated as residential. If there was nothing else there and he wanted to make it commercial, I mean, it already was commercial and he changed it to residential.
That was part of my question, yeah. So, I'm sorry, you done?
Yeah, I was just gonna, and I mean, I think I know the answer because we've been through them, but I mean, how is this any different than a home-based business? I mean, it obviously is different, but I don't know, I'm just trying to get my head around where I sort of stand on it, which I guess is what we're supposed to be doing, but yeah, just more so just thinking out loud. Go ahead.
Yeah, I hear you. I just, the fear with me is the setting the precedent part. So if we allow this in an 8 unit, why can't we allow it in a 4 unit? Possible?
It's possible, but again,
And
like I
that's
say,
part of the issues that we've been talking about lately, so.
it's one
that's-
thing to allow a restricted use for a property that's zoned R4, but this already has an existing use on it. It's already residential. So that's not the intent of a restricted use. So if you had a R4 property, it was vacant, and you wanted to
Yeah,
put another use on it in the interim, then this is a way that you could accomplish that, but it's not to have everything.
Do we have other properties around the city that would be zoned R1, R2, R3, but have a business at it, currently operating at it?
Other than a home-based business?
Like a, I don't know, like a store or like, is there any other similar?
We have other restricted uses that we have approved. So there's the church, the community church that's out in the industrial park. So that land's M1. They wanted to use it as a church. So they didn't want to have part of it, keep part of it industrial and part of it church. It was pick a use.
Yeah.
And they went with the use for the church. We have another one for, that's in Summerside, where the Moses Funeral Home, the parking area to the south side of the building. That's a restricted use. That's a residential property that we allow a parking lot on. So that use will expire if,
But nothing similar to this that you're aware of?
nothing that I can recall.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if we generally allow residential use in a commercially zoned property, could the applicant not just apply to rezone the whole thing commercial? And then he'll have his residences in there, like,
So when the applicant, we cautioned him, and again, at that time when he went to rezone, that he was changing it from commercial, going to residential. And even at that time, he was saying, well, I just want to make one unit commercial, when we can't cut out a zone in the building for that one spot. It just doesn't fit with good planning in this case, or in any residential zone would we recommend. I mean, there are some commercial uses within residential neighborhoods, but normally there's own C2 to allow like a convenience store, or that type of thing.
I'm just really trying to come up with a way that this works, because I know we're sort of pushing as a city to go towards the mixed use, and I know this is different mixed, it's not true mixed use, but we just seem to be trying to go in that direction lately, but I get it, I see how is this any different than somebody wanting a store on the second floor of a, like, I get it, it's exactly the same, but I'm just trying to see how to make it work, so.
Just to kind of go back to Councillor Morrison's point about if he no longer owned the building and the restricted use, would it stay or would it go? And you've said that stayed, but in section D, as per section 8.5E, council may attach terms and conditions to the restricted use approval. Council may revoke a restricted use approval for a violation to any term and condition attached to the approval subject to a recommendation from the planning board. So technically, couldn't that, what Councillor Morrison said, couldn't we attach those stipulations to it?
Council has a right to attach conditions as per the bylaw, but again, I don't think it's sound planning. It's again, it's not the mechanism that's used for this particular case. It's not a single use. He now has two uses on the same property in the same building.
So just, I'm a little slow some days. So did you say earlier though that if it was, it was previously zoned commercial?
Correct.
And in a commercial zone, I could build a building, and I think you used the word commercial, not retail, but you can now have residential in a commercial building.
You can, but a part of your commercial space has to be on the first floor and has to occupy at least 50% of that main floor.
Okay. So you know where I was going. Yeah. So if he left it commercial and put 7 residential units in one commercial, that wouldn't fit, because it's not. Unless the one residential one was more than 50%.
That's correct.
Or, sorry.
The commercial piece was,
Yes.
Yeah.
Was more than 50%.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And so this was, as Councillor Morrison just recalled, and I remember when we were going through it, it was zoned commercial originally. And if we think of what the sort of area is like now, like the character, it's a very commercial sort of area, like with Butcher and the Honda but so to me, it doesn't seem like it's not all that out of character to have a commercial use in that structure, because I'm just thinking of what the area is. Whereas if this was in the middle of, you know, a quiet residential subdivision, it would be a lot different. I don't know, it seems like a sort of a commercial area, and I don't know if that's the right terminology or the right mindset to have, but I don't know, I'm still trying to.
I'm sort of along the same wavelength. If it was an existing building that had tenants in it, that had residents in it living for a specific area, where it's a new build, it's sort of, that's what's throwing personally me for a loop, thinking, well, somebody moving into that building, they know what is there, and it sort of maybe softens it, whether or not it's sound planning or not. I'm trying to figure out, yeah, so I'm sort of on that same wavelength. But regardless, it has to go to council.
Yeah,
and-
we don't have to decide today, but yeah.
just planning board has to make a recommendation, but I guess I just draw your attention back to section 8.5, and the purpose of the restricted use designation is to manage requests for land uses that have unique characteristics, special requirements, or innovative ideas because of unusual site constraints. I guess that's where we were getting back. It doesn't fit into that restricted use designation.
Yeah, and I'm torn between what we have in the bylaw and the direction that we seem to be wanting to go as a council, as a city, and introducing more, I'll say mixed use. I know this isn't, again, that per the bylaw, a mixed use, but sort of intertwining those residential uses with commercial uses in the same building, close proximity to one another. It feels like that's what we're trying to do, yet the bylaw kind of is preventing us from doing that in this case, but again, it's obvious why. So I think as a counselor, I'm gonna struggle to, decide what I wanna do over the next little while. But I'm certainly prepared as a member of planning board to move this forward, so.
Okay,
Yeah.
so moved by Councillor Doiron. Do you have somebody to second it? So moved. Seconded by Councillor Morrison, so. You wanna read out the planning board recommendation?
Yeah, sure. The application from Core Ventures, Inc. to allow a restricted use retail store, which entails a retail space, an office space for nutrition consultations, and 2 tanning rooms in 1 unit of an 8-unit apartment building at 480 Central Street, PID number 1173798, be recommended to be approved by council.
So, again, it was moved by Councillor Doiron, seconded by Councillor Morrison. Planning board members, all in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, nay. So 2-1. It's moved on to council for further discussion and approval. Next up is number 6, public street naming, proposed street off Reed Drive. Councillor Doiron.
Okay, purpose is to name public street off Reed Drive. Background, the owner/developer, 102454 PEI Inc., Nathan Kember, wishes to propose street names for the public street off Reed Drive. The developer is requested to submit 3 names for consideration in order of preference in efforts to avoid conflicts within our fire and police service emergency 911 area. The developer has proposed Kember, Prestige, and Ezra for consideration for the proposed street off Reed Drive. The proposed name Kember is in honor of the developer's family name. The proposed name Prestige relates to a business in the area owned by the developer. The proposed name Ezra is in honor of the developer's father. The process noted below, section 2, part A, street naming. For choosing a street name that is not on the approved street name list shall make application to council. Section 2, street naming, part A, any person who wishes to use a name that is not on the approved street name list shall make application to council, therefore, and council shall approve or deny the application by simple resolution, based on 1, the recommendation of the street naming committee, 2, the conformance of the proposed name with this policy, and 3, any other considerations that council considers relevant. The developer was requested to submit 3 names for consideration in order of preference. The names are as follows: Kember, Prestige, and Ezra. Report, as required under the Emergency 911 Act, the city is a designated municipality and is responsible for assigning civic addresses. A public road must be named if it provides access to 3 or more improved properties. As per Schedule B, the street naming policy of the site development and subdivision, any person who wishes to use a name that is not on the approved street name list shall make application to council, and council shall approve or deny by simple resolution. The Street Naming Committee review. The committee has reviewed the proposed street names. The street suffix will be street as per the street naming policy. And from that policy, Schedule B, subdivision and site development bylaw. The proposed street names noted above conform with the street naming policy. Based on the developer's order of preference, the street name Kember is being forwarded for consideration. As per the street naming policy, council will approve or deny the name being forwarded for consideration. While the street naming policy process does not require a review and recommendation from the planning board regarding street naming, it has been the city's practice to vet proposed street names other than those on the approved street name list to planning board for discussion. The planning board recommendation, the proposed street name Kember be recommended to be approved by council. Moved by myself, and I would ask for a seconder from planning board. Councillor Morrison. Any questions or comments?
Just one quick one. I know it's talked about often, but there was effort put in by the committee to put names, and I'm wondering if it's not time we start thinking about ways we can maybe incentivize people to pull names off that list. And I don't know what that might look like, but if there was enough desire to find street names to name streets and put effort into it and form a committee and so on, and then for those just to sit there and not get utilized because the names have some significance to the history of this city, or it just seems we're doing it a disservice after And there's nothing wrong with Kember and Prestige and Ezra and, you know, developers have that right, I think, as well, but, if, as a municipality, we want to see some of those street name used in future development, future street names, I think we need to start coming up with an incentive for developers to use those, because otherwise people have lots of ideas of their own street names and would have no desire to pull from there. So that's just a comment other than anything, but I have no issue with any of those names, but, so specifically in this one, we're talking Kember, correct? Councillor McDougall?
Yeah, and I hear you. I had mentioned that the last time we had a street naming, that I don't think we're ever going to get to the list if we keep on the policy that we have now. You know, if we have names there that we think are deserving of street names, how do we get there if we're following this routine all the time? And I have no problem with these names. It's just that there's names on the list, I think, that are very deserving of noted streets, and I don't know when we'll ever get there, so, thank you.
Further from me? Read the
Okay,
recommendation again?
yeah, recommendation, the planning board recommendation, and actually, before I do, I agree. I think we need to have that meeting or that talk as well. I agree. But I also agree that this is a fine name. Planning board recommendation, the proposed street name Kember be recommended to be approved by council, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Morrison. All members of planning board in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? There are none. So that will go forward to council with planning board's recommendations.
All right, with that, that's the end of the planning board agenda. We'll move for adjournment. Moved by Councillor Morrison, seconded by Councillor Doiron. All in favor? Adjourned. We'll move right into the committee of the whole. We'll call the committee of the whole meeting to order for August 6, 2024. Can we get an approval of the agenda? Councillor Cameron, seconded by Councillor McDougall. Any conflict of interest declarations? Not seeing any. First up on the agenda is shipping containers as outbuildings. So that has Deputy Mayor Snow on it. That is myself. So quickly to talk about this, there is a specific area in my ward that, Ward 4, Clifton Market, that has recently had a shipping container be approved by city to be used as an outbuilding. There's been some concerns raised from residents in the area regarding what this could possibly mean, why it is approved, how that got approved, that sort of stuff. When I brought it to the city to check into the approval process, it's my understanding that there's currently nothing on our city bylaws, rules regulating this type of storage container to be utilized. As we do know, storage containers are being used for lots of stuff, buildings, housing, so on, around the island and North America and so on. But there were some residents that had some concerns with how it fits with the neighborhood, maybe how, you know, what they could possibly look like. And I did say that I would definitely bring it forward as a concern that they had and see if there's anything we should be looking at in regards to that, and how whether or not it should be approved or shouldn't, or not. That's a discussion to be had, but with currently having no oversight of it, it was interesting to realize that there was nothing currently on the books that's to control anything like that. So do you have anything?
Yeah, I can, I don't know if, there's oversight on where the location is, right? Like, and the one in question, and there are other shipping containers that I know are being used as outbuildings. So there is oversight in terms of the setback and where they could go. Having some more discussion around it is on the list of things for a further official plan review as we move through the fall and into 2025. We don't regulate what materials people can use for buildings, so, like, for example, somebody could build, an outbuilding, you know, use metal siding, and somebody could build an outbuilding that looks very, very similar to a shipping container. We don't regulate what, building materials can be used. Yeah, so that's the current state.
Is that the only type of building that we don't have any oversight's a bad word for it, I realize that, but,
Yeah.
any restrictions or rules, like other than setback, as long as the person is meeting the setbacks for their property to the
Well, I
neighboring
guess-
property?
Last year, we had a question, somebody raised a comment around some wording that was on the side of a shipping container. The resident, I don't think, like, you know, the word, and, I mean, to take it to kind of the ridiculous, like, somebody could write wording on the side of their garage, and there'd be nothing, you know, we don't regulate that, right? Somebody could paint their home and in various ways that most people, or some people might find unappealing, and some people might find very attractive, and we don't regulate the attractiveness of what the paint looks like per se, as long as it is painted. In terms of building materials for other structures, as long as they meet the building code, that's what we regulate.
I've talked with some residents, and I understand fully their concern. I do think that sometimes shipping containers can look appealing. They depending, like, there's some nice shipping containers out there. I guess my concern is where we have no, so what would stop somebody from, like, if I got an old trailer, taking it in, ripping the wheels off and setting that there and saying that's my building? Like where there's no posts, yeah, I guess that's where it concerns me. Where you can just sort of make a building out of anything, like you mentioned, and what that would possibly look like in a neighborhood and the concerns.
It is on staff's list of things to take a look at, but I don't want to lead you to believe the staff are of the mind that this is something that I think needs to be highly regulated, but it is on the list of, it's a concern that has been brought up in the past, and it is on the list of things to be at least thought about further, in terms of, further OP review, so.
So can we get that? We don't know when that'll be though, right?
That'll be through this fall, yeah.
Through
Yep.
fall. So when that comes back, that'll come back to council with any, okay.
Gordon, I was always under the understanding that a shipping container could be used as a temporary. And I have no problem with that. I never knew that you could have a permanent one, so. That's just,
It's not so much whether you can or can't right now. I mean, it's not something we say, it's like, it's approving, and it's not something that we say you can't have, so therefore you can.
So to Bruce's point, I would think of a shipping container as something temporary unless it has a foundation under it or something making it permanent.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of outbuildings won't have a foundation under it, will just be on blocks. But I do think of a shipping container as a temporary storage structure. When it becomes permanent, I think that's where it, and I guess my issue would be that, and I understand this didn't need to come to council for approval. Staff just approved it, but now, after the fact, as a councillor for that area, and it could be any councillor, now we're hearing some residents have a concern with it, which is totally fine, but now there's no recourse because it's already been approved, or, do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
it just,
and I'm not
it's a little
advocating one way or
frustrating
the other,
that
but, I mean, who's to say this one's not temporary, right? Like, somebody may come in and say, hey, listen, I'd like to have an outbuilding in my property for the next 12 to 18 months because X, Y, Z. So I'd like,
but I
that's my
don't,
plan,
and in this situation, it's not temporary, or that's the impression that we got from the approval, right?
yeah, it's not a question we ask when somebody's bringing in a site plan for an outbuilding, but.
So, could I request that staff, contact the owners and find out if it's a temporary or a permanent structure? That way maybe it's a moot point, so if it is, to Bruce's point, if it's
Right.
temporary and being used temporarily, then perfect, that's a
Get a temporary permit.
good,
yeah.
it is what it is, but if it's permanent, then I think it's worth a discussion. If something's going to be permanent and we don't have any regulations on it or any sort of, or there's some gray area, I think that's the time that it should come to council, for some sort of discussion on it, otherwise now so if it is permanent and we're not backed in the corner, but we've approved it as a city, the recourse to get it moved, or it makes it a lot harder.
Yeah, we can certainly ask the resident what their intentions are. They may tell us, they may not. But again, I guess I'd just repeat that somebody could come in and give us a site plan for their outbuilding that they're gonna build, and we get the permit through the normal, regular process, and then go and build a outbuilding that looks similar or worse than, it's all very subjective, but
Yeah,
to what a shipping container is made out of. But yeah, we can certainly follow up with the resident and ask them what their intentions are with it.
okay, that'd be perfect, and then I can provide some information to the residents.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Can I ask what the?
Oh, yeah,
I guess I'm
sorry,
just-
go ahead.
No, I was just sort of
Councillor
thinking it
Doiron.
over. What was the original, complaint or complaints? Was it just purely the look of it, or was it blocking a view of something? or-
I think it was a combination of, location, combination of just the concern about what if these popped up all over the city, like it just, they didn't think that it was,
Didn't think it looked nice.
the proper use of it, of a shipping
Didn't think it
container,
looked
it's
nice.
temporary.
Didn't think it looked nice.
Right.
So if someone was to put a shed of the same dimensions in the same spot, that would be okay with,
That,
Whatever.
I don't know the answer to that, that's a,
I'm just trying to,
But
I don't
there was some
understand.
question
Just
about,
don't look at it
you know,
if you
do
don't
we
like it, but, yeah.
put these all over the city.
I'm trying to understand what
Yeah,
the
100%.
big deal is, basically, but I get it.
Yeah.
I'm just, I don't see if it was,
Go ahead.
if it wasn't a shipping container, what, yeah.
Just a point, Gordon. This, you say, was not, it was something that came to them that they didn't have a ruling whether it should or should not be allowed, right?
I'm not sure who you mean they. Somebody come in and ask for a
Somebody come
permit
in and ask
to put a outbuilding on their property
Right, shipping container on their property.
and we ask for the normal questions we ask about
Right,
sight lines and setbacks.
right.
And we currently don't have any regulations around what materials you're allowed to use in that, so shipping containers are deemed to be appropriate materials, the same way wood or siding or sheet metal or anything else that somebody might use for an outbuilding.
Yeah. No, I just figured if we weren't sure if this is what we wanted to do, I thought it should have come back to council before, something like that. Huh? If we don't have a ruling whether shipping containers are allowed or not, I was wondering why it didn't come back to council. Anyway,
I guess staff have approved,
but do they
half a
have
dozen of these in the last
do they
couple
have
years?
the right to approve it?
yes.
Be without,
I mean, I think my simple answer is yes, but at the same
Anyway,
time, council is free to pass a resolution and saying, no shipping containers in residential property.
Right, yeah,
Like,
okay.
that's- it's not-
I'm not gonna waste any more time.
So from this, can we just have, maybe the next step would be to figure out, because it could be a viewpoint if it's not a permanent structure, and then we can look at the OP, but if it's a permanent structure, then I think maybe we might need to have some further discussion with staff and council around what we would like to see, and which is gonna happen. Okay,
Yep.
perfect. Anything else in regards to that? Any other questions? Not seeing any, we can move on to number 5, so no parking on south side of Oak Avenue. Chief Sinclair Walker's here. Basically, residents in that area have brought some concerns forward to myself. Mayor Kuchar received some, just regarding parking that currently is allowed on both sides of Oak. There's a picture on our screen, I assume you can see it if you're watching online, that shows currently with cars parked on both sides, and there's concerns about safety in the area. I'll pass it over to Chief Sinclair Walker to give a quick update.
Great, thank you. Actually, this concern has come to our attention back in 223 as well. We had two concerns back in 223, and our system only goes back 2 years, and there may have been concerns before that as well. The most recent concern was in July, when there was, I believe it had to do with Summerside Intermediate School's graduation. We were called there, the police were called there, as a result of the street really only passable by a single vehicle only, and there was concerns of safety. At that time, our hands were pretty much tied. We did address the vehicles that were blocking driveways and so on and so forth. Some of their concerns, of course, is the safety within the area. If they had an emergency, like a fire truck trying to get through. So we looked at the photos, and I did address the issue with Aaron McDonald. And he did come back, and he said that the street is a narrow street, okay? And although it's in that photo, it is narrow, it is possible for 2 single vehicles to pass, but very difficult. Very difficult. So the recommendation is to make the south side of Oak Avenue no parking, as the north side has got the sidewalk on it, so people would just step out of the vehicles right on the sidewalk. So the recommendation is to have parking on both sides of Oak. Has been a safety concern for residents in the area. This concern was brought to the city's attention during events taking place at Summerside Intermediate School. So the recommendation is Oak Avenue is a narrow street that has a sidewalk on the north side with vehicles parked on both sides of the street. This can be an issue if 2 vehicles meet each other, and for large emergency vehicles should they have to respond to calls for service. And there is the diagram attached there that what we're recommending is the south side, I believe, from Central to Duke Street. Cedar Street.
Central
Cedar, yeah.
My first question would be, why just to Cedar?
Because I think the issue has to do with the proximity within the SIS school. So I think that we blocked it. To go all the way to the other street, I don't know really if it's necessary. That wasn't recommended.
My thought is, I guess my thought is if it's warranted because of safety in that area, then I'd like to see it the whole way. I think it sort of, that sends a mixed message to me when I think of it. If we have concerns that we can't get vehicles down safety, otherwise we're just doing it just to do it.
Yeah, no, well, we have a number, if not most streets in town that have allowed parking on both sides of the street, right? Very rarely do you have both sides of a street lined with cars, other than when there are some sort of special events going on. So, like, the safety concern in question on this street is a I don't wanna say a couple times a year safety concern, but it's a couple times a year safety concern. So typically, we try not to restrict on-street parking unless we have to. The residents on this street, especially on the south side, have requested it, and they are asking for that restricted use in front of their properties. So I guess staff feel that by restricting it down to cedar, that's gonna solve the safety issue that happens a few times a year.
Okay, sure. So then basically this will have to move forward to council for final approval? Any other questions from councillors regarding that? We're okay to move it forward to next council meeting for approval? All right, so we'll move that forward to next council meeting for approval. Number 6 on the committee of the whole would be the Pope Road, Greenwood Drive, lights, line painting, timeline, update. Councillor Doiron.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Snow. I think the first part sort of speaks for itself. I was hoping just to get an update. Lots of residents are contacting me over the last, kind of ramped up over the last month, I guess, or so, since mid-July. Kind of looking for a timeline when the work might be starting at that intersection. I did inquire early on whether or not that would be part of the active transportation project, and I was, Gordon let me know that it was. I think it was JP at the time. Part one of that item, I guess we're just wondering on a timeline when that might get underway, if you have that information.
Yeah, I have you're absolutely correct. So the lights are part of the active transportation tender, and that's for a couple reasons. There may be some modifications to that intersection, minor modifications, curbing, that sort of thing, that happen as part of the AT route as well. So you don't want to put the lights in and then go and do the AT work and then have to move things around. The AT route design has certainly taken longer than we expected, but the tender for that work should be out by August 14th. The award would happen likely about a month after that, so it is going to be a fall project. And it is a couple weeks delivery on the lights, but so we're looking at a late November install for the lights, and the completion of the active transportation route. In terms of the line painting and the arrow painting on the intersections, just a little update on painting in general. To date, we've painted 208 crosswalks. 208 crosswalks have been completed. That's all of them. 31 intersections for stop bars and lane arrows have been completed. I know at that intersection in particular, that yellow center line is people are still being educated on how those lanes work at that intersection currently. Usually the province does our center line painting. They have been, they couldn't commit to a timeline this year, or they couldn't commit to the similar timeline that they've had in the past. So we've gone out and found another private contractor to do that center line painting, and that actually is supposed to start today, and it should be done by the end of August. So I know the arrows that are painted by our city staff were just recently done. So yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. And I know line painting in general comes up, and which was sort of part of my submission here. It was the lights, but also line painting in general. And I know it comes back every year, and we always sort of reiterate the fact that it's, the fact that the lines don't last is, provincial environmental regulations, but I really wonder every year, like our other, like Toronto, for example, are they repainting lines every year, or is it provincial? Maybe they have different regulations. Like, is Charlottetown even repainting as many? It seems that every line in the city seems to be needing to be redone, at least in those high traffic areas. But by the time we get them done, the snow comes and they don't even last through the snow. Like it's just, and then the spring comes and the lines are gone. So I know Director Greg has looked into different products and that sort of thing, but
Yeah.
like, it's every year, they just, spring happens and the lines are gone and people are everywhere, and I wonder, are we the only city where that happens? I couldn't imagine we are, but are there other cities using different methods or different products? I don't know.
I know it's something we've talked about in the past in regards to, and it's interesting because you mentioned a third party doing the center lines, but I think our city is growing at a pace where our staffing, we haven't been increasing probably as much as our growth, and it's a lot of work, and I'm thinking more and more as it seems to get later and later that, so I don't want to take anything away from the staff. To your point, they've painted tons of lines, but I think in a way of supporting our staff, we really need to look at, and our residents, a way at getting them done at the start of the year, whether or not that's a contracted out and certain parts are done and done early, so then we have them all summer and maybe done again in the fall. I don't know, but I don't think the current timelines are working well, in my opinion. Others might think it's fine and totally okay, but I can tell you without a doubt, I've spoke to friends who like to give you a hard time over everything at certain times, but they strictly say, you know, if I had to go to Summerside to go shopping uptown, well, you never know where you're gonna go in an arrow, so I'm not going. Like, the lines aren't painted, blah, blah. So it's just anecdotal, but it's something we definitely need to look at.
Yeah, and just to follow up to Deputy Mayor Snow's comments is, and again, to me, I'm not blaming staff. It may be more our fault for not having enough staff doing that job. But was I also led to believe, was there an issue with some of the provincial paint? Were they down a vehicle or something, or they had, because in my mind, when I go around town still, like, it's close to the middle of August and most intersections haven't been touched. I mean, the crosswalks are there and stuff, but as far as the lines and the arrows and nothing was done. And I'm just wondering is it just my imagination, or are we into later than normal, or?
No, I think we're actually a little bit ahead of schedule but, I'm just looking at this update here. Most intersections should be done by now. We have, I know Director Goody, we've brought a couple different reports to council, and we can certainly do it again, but, you know, ballpark, we're looking at approximately, you know, $150,000 a year added, $150,000 a year to the operational budget if we wanted to put a second crew on. That's certainly something we can have a further discussion on.
I think it's time we bring back either putting on a second crew and going outside and doing some private contractors and seeing what that looks like. I can't remember where I was over across, and the private contractors were out all night we had a late night, and they were out painting the lines during the night and doing that sort of stuff, right? So I know we have union guys, we have a lot of stuff going on, so we need to make sure that we're looking at all options to find a solution, because from sounds of councillors and feedback from residents, I don't think it's working, so maybe we can.
Yeah, it's simply a matter of how much resources we want to put towards it.
Yeah, so maybe if we can get the options back for staff, because we'll be getting ready to go into budget anyways. Sound good? All right, so with that we can move for adjournment of the committee of the whole. Perfect. Let's take want to take a 2-minute break or no? We can go right into special council. Let's go into special council meeting. Okay, well, let's start by calling the special council meeting to order. Can I get an approval of the agenda? Moved by Councilor McDougall, seconded by Councilor Cameron. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any conflicts of interest? Not hearing none. We'll have to back it up because, yeah, there is an amendment to the agenda. So number 5 on there, 135 Victoria Road, restricted use. That has been withdrawn by the applicant. So
Okay.
now, with that in mind, can we get an approval of agenda? Councillor
So moved.
Cameron, seconded by Councillor McDougall. All in favor? Say aye. All right, we're up to number 4, East-West Connector Bylaw, CS-42. There is a resolution.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Snow, and I believe at this time, I guess before the first reading, is this at the point when Mr. Key is going to present some information? So we'll ask Derek to come up at his convenience, and we'll carry on.
Welcome, Mr. Key.
Mayor Snow, hello councillors. So, as you're aware, the city embarked on the East-West Connector early in the spring. The attempt is to recover a certain part or portion of the capital costs associated with that, consistent with, from the developers or from the property owners, landowners, consistent with the existing latecomer bylaws that you've had for a number of years. The distinction between what has gone on in the past and this particular project is that, unlike the latecomer charge bylaw that relates to a developer putting in a street and recovering a portion of his costs from the other property owners who benefit from that street or service, this is where the city is putting in the municipal work or local improvement. So if you go to the Municipal Government Act, it specifically provides for the requirement for the city to have a bylaw as it relates to its cost recovery program when there is a local improvement undertaken. So in this instance, the local improvement is the East-West Connector. That includes, obviously, acquiring the land, developing the street, the water, sewer, curbing, sidewalks, lighting, and in this case, an active transportation corridor. So those are the local improvements. So the property owners on both sides of the local improvement benefit from that and have the opportunity to subdivide, develop, build upon, continue to farm, whatever, their property now with that local improvement in place. So what you have before you, and that what I presume Councillor Doiron will present to council, are the specifics relating to that bylaw that you're required to approve that will allow the city to enforce those provisions that are basically set out within the Municipal Government Act and which now inform the community as to what the rules are relating to that particular local improvement. Mr. CAO, did I miss anything in that 12-second explanation? No, I think you hit most of the high points. I think it's important for council to know that staff and with the assistance of folks at Key Murray Law, we've been in discussions with all the property owners that this new bylaw will affect. We're in the process of getting implementation agreements signed with all of them. That includes property owners for phase 1 and phase 2, which is coming right up. That process is chugging along. There's lots of questions and lots of communication back and forth, but it's moving along. So tonight again is first reading. It's an opportunity if council has any questions on on the bylaw that they've, reviewed to ask either myself or Derek. And if not, move forward with the, resolution.
Yeah, is there a timeline on the latecomer charge?
Not
I
in this
thought-
by- Not in this bylaw, no. So there-
Previous, there was a
20
20-year thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, and that was
But it's not
somewhat
in here.
arbitrary. It was just picked that they would just go away in 20 years, but in this bylaw, no, they.
Doesn't go away.
Correct, the charges
Thank you.
are there, they're registered, and,
Right.
again, all the property owners have been communicated all this information, but,
Okay.
the latecomer charge that is applied, is based on the cost of building a local street. So in this case, we're building a wider street with sidewalk and, active transportation route. The property owners are only, the latecomer charge is only being based on the cost of a local street. We're using the cost of a local street that was built in 2023. So there's it's a very fair price. Yeah. We're also, one question that we did have from a number of property owners was, Bruce, you may be familiar in old, latecomer charges. If you did anything to improve your property, the full 100% of the latecomer charges were now due. This bylaw, instead of doing that, it's a phased payback of those latecomer charges. So if you develop 25% of your property, you'll owe 25% of the latecomer charges. And that's, we believe that's more fair and consistent with how kind of the land will be developed along the east-west corridor.
I think it's fair.
Quick question, not directly related to the bylaw, but I think relevant. Someone had asked me over the weekend, they noticed an ad in the newspaper last week, and I didn't see it, so I don't know exactly what it was, but they said, I think it was a tender for
Phase two.
phase two. Was that the true phase two, or was that like phase two of phase one? Like, it was a tender for the
That's
actual,
the start of, that's
the northern,
correct.
okay,
It's
so
the
it's
start
the
of
actual
phase
phase
two.
two.
It's
okay.
not the long connector, as it's identified in here.
Yeah, no, I wasn't sure, because I was sort of caught off guard, and I thought, well, I don't remember talking about phase two in the budget, but then so it is the tender for the actual second half of the corridor
Correct.
road, okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
And then the plan would be, that at a minimum, the part that's under construction this year, so let's call that part A, will be paved next spring.
Sure.
And open to the public by, say, July, but, it could be July or August. And then depending on what the construction schedule is like on phase two, and obviously depending on budget, that section will be
Yeah.
done next year as well.
So when we drive by now on Water Street and we see what we see,
Yeah.
that same scope is what's being tendered for phase two, the clearing of the area.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Did you say, Gordon, that the paving will be done next year?
Correct.
On the part that started now?
Correct.
Okay, and just so I understand, so when I look quickly over this information, it says it's $3,500 plus HST per meter of frontage along the New Brick Street right away?
Correct.
And we're basing that on a less extravagant street or road?
That,
You're taking it from that's a year old
correct.
and wouldn't have nearly as much stuff, like,
Correct.
yeah.
Yeah, so like,
The trail and the.
I don't want to say, the property owners are getting a street.
Yes.
They're getting a collector-size street with sidewalk and active transportation for the price of a normal local street.
But may not have a sidewalk even.
That would not have a sidewalk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and just so I'm clear, so if I owned land in there, and I didn't have that paid, and I sold the land, what happens then? Is there a lien against the property, or does it,
Yeah, that, it's registered against the property.
yeah, so it either,
But if you're currently farming the land,
Yes.
and your taxes are based on the use, your taxes, your tax bill is not gonna change based on this improvement on the land.
it'll remain the same as it is, and then
Yeah.
the latecomer charge will just continue to carry forward until it is developed? Is that how it?
Basically, yeah.
Thank you.
So, are we to read in the bylaw name the entire? We should, right?
It's not required as long as there's copies on hand at the meeting.
Be here till Friday.
Need to read the resolution. And then this would be available basically online for anybody to see as well, right? Yeah. Okay, we fine with that? Is there any other questions before we move on to the resolution? All right, I'll read in the resolution, then we'll look for a mover and a seconder. Whereas the city of Summerside, oh, perfect. Oh, I'll get it from you in a second, let me see. All right, whereas the city of Summerside seeks to have constructed a new road that will connect Ryan Street and Water Street East, allowing traffic to flow across the city in either an easterly or westerly direction, be it resolved that CS-42 East-West Connector Bylaw be hereby read a first time. CS-42 East-West Connector Bylaw is attached, and that is moved by Councillor.
Has moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Cameron.
So, council, we've all heard the resolution. Do we have any further questions? No questions? So moved by Councillor Ron, seconded by Councillor Cameron. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Aye, opposed? Not hearing none, it is carried unanimously. That is the end of the special council meeting. Can we get a movement for adjournment? Oh,
There's the
what did I miss?
first reading approval. That was the first reading. and this is
Did I,
approving
how did I
what we
miss
just
that?
Approved. 24-070.
Yeah, it's,
I got it.
no, it's not in my package.
I got them.
Well, my numbers ain't, my pages ain't numbered. Yeah, I must got a different package.
I got a printed copy right here.
All right, if you want to read it in, you can go ahead.
Okay. Resolution COS 24-070, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McDougall. Whereas the city of Summerside seeks to have constructed a new road that will connect Ryan Street and Water Street East, allowing for traffic flow across the city in either an easterly or westerly direction. And whereas CS-42 East-West Connector Bylaw was read a first time at this council meeting, be it resolved that CS-42 East-West Connector Bylaw be hereby declared read a first time and approved at this council meeting.
Council, you all heard the resolution. Any further questions? All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Motion carried, resolution carried, sorry. Now we can move for adjournment. Moved by Councilor McDougall, all in favor?